Hi, I am Naomi Keller, and I am currently a student at LSU, and I'll be graduating this May. And for this webinar, I'm going to be talking about formula feeding versus breastfeeding and its effects on obesity and honestly other chronic diseases later on in life, such as type 2 diabetes or things such as that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right. So, current obesity statistics, just to start us off here. Obesity in general is very common. It's usually costly and serious. Just in 2015 and 2016, 93.3 million were actually affected by obesity. Obesity causes other things to stem from it, such as heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, cancers. And then in 1999 through 2000, through 2017 and 2018, the prevalence of obesity actually increased by about 10%. And the prevalence of severe obesity increased by much more than that, 4.7 to 9.2%, as you see. First off, I wanted to just begin with the breakdown of breast milk versus formula fed. Components of breast milk is comprised of thousands of beneficial components. I mean, first you have your colostrum that coats and seals your newborn stomach lining to help mature that milk that helps the baby grow strong. Each drop of breast milk contains thousands of beneficial components, like I mentioned. It usually consists of antibodies to protect the child against illness. You have hormones that promote bonding and regulate that appetite. You also have stem cells. Those are really important in supporting organ development and repair. And then you have beneficial bacteria. This is the bacteria that helps the baby's digestive system. So it correlates with that lining in the body. And you have prebiotics called oligosaccharides that support a healthy gut as well. Can't forget about our long chain fatty acids and then your enzymes to support digestive and immune system as well. So as you see, this breast milk is just very important in helping build up that baby's immune system when they're so young. I mean, they're so vulnerable to whatever life has or our environment. So it's really important for them to be getting nutrients or components to help them live through and become strong. Components of baby formula. Ingredients really vary by brand. Obviously, you know, when you're buying a little bit more expensive brand, you are getting what you pay for with baby formula. But the main elements are still there. I believe all baby formula manufacturers really try to comprise it of those things that the babies really need. Majority is going to be processed skim cow's milk. You're going to have emulsifiers and stabilizers in there as well. And then others may contain the lactose, plant-based oils, vitamins, minerals, so on, with a few amino acids and probiotics for some. Um, Not all formulas contain the probiotics, but some do. And I feel like that's great to have. You may find that those may be a little bit more expensive. Now, just in general, breastfed infants compared to formula fed, uh, breastfed are usually a lot leaner than artificially fed. And you find that the theory of that is that the high nutrient diet in the infancy adversely programs the principal components of metabolic syndrome in the child. So this in return really helps with their body mass index, blood pressure, and blood lipids. It really helps promote their growth acceleration, whereas slower growth benefits later can cause cardiovascular disease and then other risk factors. And this is just the comparison between breast milk and formula fed. I also have that breast milk high nutrient contents are also correlated with promoted growth acceleration in child. So not just as far as obesity goes, like decreasing obesity with breast milk, but also your child's psychological knowledge, whether, you know, how quick they are to learn something, maybe even how quick they are to get their motor skills. Artificial feedings stimulate high postnatal growth velocity, so just meaning they tend to put on weight a lot faster. They do not stay as lean. And then you also find there's a much higher protein content in artificial baby milk compared to breast milk. And that is really seen to be the cause or increased growth of rate of infancy. In formula-fed infants, there's also higher protein energy intake relative to breastfed. Again, I kind of mentioned that, but these are kind of a few of the things that it causes, other than just extra body weight. It increases the chances of obesity later in life, and then the differences in release of insulin and pancreatic gut hormones are really different when it comes to breast milk and formula-fed milk. Infancy also is a very crucial time for a child because weight gain in early stages can increase it for later diseases. That's just a general statement, really just explaining that the beginning stages of life are very important in teaching your child how to eat, creating like good habits. Whereas when a child is breastfeeding, they automatically stop themselves. Whereas when you are doing bottle fed or formula fed, it's ends up just being like you're pushing the child to finish the bottle. They're really not choosing or going off their own cues of if they are full or not. The importance of postnatal diet and breastfeeding. Uh, it's very unique and it's delivered as a liquid of breast milk. You usually have longer the duration of breastfeeding is said to lower the odds of early rapid weight gain. So those mothers that are breastfeeding for 6+ months, they really see a difference in the weight gain of their child. Lower obesity across the lifespan is also seen, and the energy content of human milk is lower than infant formula. That's just talking about the protein again. And then mothers are more responsive and in tune with the infants. So when you are breastfeeding, you are really on cue of what your child needs, its desires. Whereas, not to say that when you're breastfeeding, your child and you don't have a good connection, you do, and never want to make someone feel like if they're breastfeeding that they're terrible, because a lot of different circumstances can deter someone from being able to breastfeed. Not by their choice. But when you do have that nipple to child contact, it is a little bit more, intimate for you and the child. How impactful is breastfeeding for an infant to child's health? I found one article published by the UNICEF State of World Children Report, and it said that 137.7 million babies born worldwide each year, only 32.6% are actually breastfed exclusively for the first 6 months. And this is something that I believe just the nutrition world is trying to work towards getting this much higher. Because, really, breast milk is effective for more than just obesity reasons. It helps prevent diarrhea in infants. When they are newborns, I feel like that is a big issue that a lot of families or parents have when they're formula feeding. It's trying to find that right formula. It doesn't make your baby go to the bathroom all the time. It doesn't just run straight through them. And then also, it prevents the diarrhea because of the oligosaccharides and bioactive components like the lactoferrin. These components also contribute to the natural defenses of the infants, like I talked about at the very beginning with the components of breast milk. Really helps them build up an immune system and protect them from infections and viruses and things that are happening in the intestines. All right, and a little bit more in regards to this article that I found. I really found it was really interesting, and it laid out a lot of statistics and showed the research in regards to it. In regards to breastfeeding versus the formula fed and its effects on BMI or obesity later in life. At first, they actually screened about 2,500 mother-infant DIADs. It said DYADS. And 97% initiated breastfeeding, and the median breastfeeding duration was 11 months for them, whereas most infants received solids before 6 months. Among exclusively breastfed infants, 55% received some express breast milk, and 27% briefly received formula in the hospital. So they really were doing like a direct breastfeeding exclusive for 3 months versus just formula feeding. And I really think that they played around with the duration of time to really see if that had a big association with the higher BMI. And the results actually ended up proving that formula supplementation by 6 months was associated with higher BMIs. It was about adjusted deviation of plus 0.25 and 95% confidence interval. So that was said to be 0.13 to 0.38, whereas supplementation with solid foods was not. So these results really were similar for weight gain velocity, you'd say, but as far as BMI goes, they really did see a big difference in that. And this article also just found that there was a really positive impact on breastfeeding on lowering the risk of death from infectious disease in the first 2 years of life for children. So, not just in regards to obesity, but their life in general. I mean, it's near impossible for the formula that we make to provide all of the nutrients for the baby that the breast milk does. I mean, the breast milk really kind of changes and transforms to whatever the baby is needing at that moment. And I feel like that's possibly why the infection disease is much lower for the first 2 years of life for the babies versus those that just formula feed. And really, this mounting body of evidence really suggests that breastfeeding may also play an important role in programming non-communicable disease risk later in life as well, and just your overall prevention of overweight and obesity in children. And probably from the ages of about 2 to 6, really. There's not much evidence of breastfeeding being that big of a helper later on in your years and teen years. So it's more so in those beginning stages, but still, that is says a lot, and I feel like your home life also can correlate into that as well as to, you know, home cooking meals or what you're taught to eat or your daily habits with your family and things of that nature. On about this just a little bit. Uh, Recent studies published in Journal of Pediatrics also suggested a link between obesity and breastfeeding coming directly from the breast. So they found that those mothers that didn't necessarily just pump, but actually let the baby suckle, they saw a bigger change in the obesity. Breast milk helps really create a microbiome that is thought to be the correlation between lower obesity rates. Infants who are actually breastfed have this certain microbiome and it helps prevent the obesity. So I guess that direct contact is what they're referring to here. The longer the baby breastfeeds, the lower the risk of obesity indicated through this study. I also mentioned that earlier with breastfeeding longer than 6 months really ups the rate for lowering the obesity. And then bottle-fed infants, it also leads to something called volume and schedule versus breastfed, which are likely not to overfeed. And this is just explaining that when you are breastfeeding, the baby has a tendency to pull away or start to move around and move to another area. And that's just a really good cue for the mom to know, okay, my baby's done. They're probably ready for a nap. Again, with being bottle fed, it's, volume and velocity with that. I mean, you don't really know how much the baby wants. You're assuming that maybe they want 6 to 8 ounces, but really they maybe only be hungry for 4, but yet you want them to finish this bottom. So you kind of force them to in a way. And this can later just cause some issues in regards to the child's tactics with eating later on in life. They really don't have a good understanding of when to stop eating, whereas, with being breastfed, they do have that tendency to understand and really listen to their body's cues on that. A little bit more in depth about that. Again, with babies who feed directly from the breast, when they are full, they do stop sucking and they switch to this comfort kind of sucking that doesn't produce the milk. Whereas, again, when the babies are from the bottles, the parents and caregivers are more likely to push them to finish the bottle. So it's more about the schedule for them, for the parents. They're on a time schedule to get these bottles down for the babies. And then just learning to eat when you were only hungry and stop when you're full is a really good skill to have in preventing obesity later on in life in general. I feel like, you tend to, you overeat or you overindulge because you don't realize that maybe you're actually not hungry anymore. So, and then I did want to bring up the infant feedings in relation to type 1 diabetes mellitus. I don't know if I ever pronounced that right, but I found this was really interesting. This is from the same article group, NICHD, diabetes mellitus, and this is seen with babies that drink baby formula, that it doesn't contain the components that breast milk does. So it ends up destroying the insulin producing cells, like I mentioned, and this can often lead to the type 1. It's seen with research that baby formula produced with cow's milk contained proteins that destroy the insulin producing cells. And then breast milk does not elicit the same response on insulin, nor does milk formula treated with complex milk proteins. So it is said that the formulas that have the complex milk proteins are not seen to often lead to the type 1 diabetes as much. It's just those that maybe are using the lactate or are using more of that processed cow's milk baby formula. And in conclusion, though more research is definitely needed on this subject to really showcase if formula fed is leading to higher obesity rates, it may just be like the lifestyle at home that a child is going through even after their first year of life. I mean, you can't always bank something on one thing or have one culprit, but it definitely is seen to have a higher correlation. And as more research is done, it is showing this to be true. Breastfeeding can also be very tiresome and impossible for many moms. So I do just want to point out and say that, yes, breastfeeding is not the holy grail. And in a lot of situations, mothers are not capable to breastfeed. I mean, that takes a lot of time. You really have to be a stay-at-home mom. It's is tiresome, like I mentioned, but a lot of times women do have to turn to formula feeding because maybe their financial state, or maybe they're really just having problems latching, or it's a personal preference. And I feel like that's why they do have really good formula options out there to be able to provide the baby with exactly what it needs. I just wanted to mention just more of the results from that study with exclusive breastfeeding. They really found that it precludes inappropriate complementary feeding practices, such as early introduction of complementary foods that could lead to unhealthy weight gain. Um, Protein and total energy intake, as well as the amount of energy metabolized, are higher among the formula fed. And I know I mentioned that a lot, but it was just in relation to, they found 14 to 15 months when people went well over a year of formula feeding, and that often led to increased body weight during the neonatal period. Data also suggested that both higher protein intake and weight gain early in life is positively associated with the obesity later in life. Really, like, they were found that the difference in release of insulin, other pancreatic and gut hormones really were observed between breastfed and formula fed infants, and that goes into play with the type 1 diabetes mellitus that I was mentioning earlier, where the formula, it causes that those insulin cells to be attacked in a negative manner, and that can simulate fat deposition and early development of adipocytes, the cells that store the fat. So breast milk is just really seen to contain hormones and other biological factors involved in the regulation of food intake. So this is really like a huge problem, I guess, that they are facing, that this study really identified, was with the type 1 diabetes, and how there's certain proteins that are not really going to be available in some formulas, and really causes this problem that people are seeing. And just by moderating the impact of these physiological processes that promote weight gain during infancy, breastfeeding really can assist in reducing the risk of a lot of these problems. And again, it should really be put out there, the importance of breastfeeding and just how it's something great to have and something great to do or really start promoting in the world out there. Again, I do understand that many people are not able to, and that is totally understandable. But this correlation was really eye opening to me. I didn't realize that it was this in depth. And yes. So I hope y'all enjoyed this. Please let me know if you have any questions or if I missed anything. And thank you, Dr. Motley, for this semester. I appreciate all you do. And you'll have a happy Thursday.